The wind carried a low moan across the high plains as dusk fell. Dust swirled around the wagon wheels and the smell of campfire drifted in the cool air. She stood at the edge of the firelight, boots half buried in the dry earth, eyes fixed on the man across from her. The glow lit his face in flickers, sun-creased, rough from miles of trail, yet strangely steady.
Out here?
Far from the comfort of any town, a single word could mean everything. He had just asked her the question that stopped her breath. I too. Big. His voice was soft, but it cut through the hiss of the flames like steel on stone. She tilted her hat lower, hiding the tremor in her eyes, then gave a small, sure smile. Then take your time, she said quietly. Fill me slowly, so I'll never forget you. In the language of the frontier, they weren't speaking of romance, but of risk. The job they were about to undertake, a smuggling run through bandit country. Over the Black Mesa passes was too large for one wagon and one rider. The crates behind her held something rare and dangerous, a fortune if they could get it through. He had warned her about the trail, about the Apache sentries, the soldiers on patrol, the gangs that lay in wait for slow or careless travelers. She had heard all of it and still signed on. Now standing in the firelight, she was beginning to understand how big really was. The night hummed with old American sounds, a coyote's cry, a horse shifting its weight and jingling tack, the slow flap of canvas in the breeze. The sky above them was endless, stars like white seeds scattered across black soil. Everything about the land was harsh and beautiful, and it pressed on them from all sides. She felt the weight of it in her chest, as if the prairie itself were testing her resolve. Her partner's eyes held the same question his mouth had asked. Can you handle this? Can you carry this load, this danger, this promise? To the day she had met him in a small frontier town, when she'd first heard whispers of the run. He was leaning on a post outside the livery, tall and quiet, with a shadowed past nobody could quite name. Some called him a scout who'd once ridden with the army, others a deserter who'd turned outlaw. What she saw was a man who knew the land, who carried himself like he belonged to it. When he had offered her a place on the run, she'd laughed. She'd been hauling freight for years. Nothing scared her. But the glint in his eyes had stayed with her, a warning and a dare at once. Now, with the fire between them, she wondered what she had really agreed to. Fill me slowly, she had said, because the task ahead would need patience, skill, and trust. The phrase had felt strange leaving her mouth, but she meant it. Don't dump all the danger on me at once. Show me the trail piece by piece. Teach me how to survive it. She wasn't ready to be broken by one more hard winter or one more bad job. She wanted to make it through, remember it, and walk away stronger. He moved closer, his boots stirring the dust. We leave before dawn, he said. Once we're past the ridgeline, there's no turning back. His voice was low but steady, sound like a slow river over stone. He reached out and touched the edge of the canvas tarp covering the crates, his fingers lingering as though he could feel the value inside. Then his eyes met hers. If you have doubts, speak now. The trail won't forgive hesitation. She held his gaze, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Doubt was a luxury she couldn't afford. The town she'd left behind had nothing left for her but debts and a reputation. Out here she could start fresh. It's out here she could earn enough to buy her freedom, maybe even her own spread of land. But the man across the fire wasn't just an employer. He was the key to making it or losing everything. The words she had spoken earlier still hung between them like smoke. Fill me slowly, so I'll never forget you. They were a promise and a challenge both. A log cracked in the fire, throwing up sparks. For a moment, she thought she heard something in the darkness beyond the circle of light. A horse's snort, a whisper of movement. She glanced toward the trees but saw only shadows. Her partner followed her gaze. His hand hovered near the butt of his revolver, though he didn't draw. We're being watched, he said softly, almost as if he were telling her the weather. Could be nothing, could be everything. The smell of pine and smoke mingled in her nose. She tightened her scarf and listened, every muscle taut. She thought of the stories she'd heard, Apache scouts who could slip through trees without a sound, gangs that sent children ahead as decoys. She wasn't sure which was worse, She wasn't sure she wanted to know. She looked back at the crates, thinking of what was inside and why so many wanted it. Gold? Weapons? Medicine? She'd been told only supplies, but the way he guarded them told her it was more. "We move at first light," he repeated. His face was unreadable, but there was something like regret in his eyes. "If you're still with me by then, you'll see what's at stake." His words settled over her like a blanket of dust. This was no ordinary job. This was something that could mark a life or end it. She turned away from the fire and walked to the edge of the camp where her horse was tethered. The mare flicked an ear at her, sensing her unease. She stroked its neck and breathed deep. The night air tasted of iron and sage. Behind her, she could hear him moving about, checking gear, loading rifles. She wondered if he doubted her, if he expected her to ride off before dawn. She wondered if he wanted her to. Her mind returned to the question. Too big. The words echoed now with more meaning than ever. Too big a job. Too big a risk. Too big a secret. And her answer, the one she had already given, bound her to the trail ahead. "Fill me slowly," she had said. She would take it 1 mile at a time. She would learn what she needed to learn. She would endure. Somewhere beyond the trees, an owl called. The sound was long and low, like a warning. She closed her eyes, listening. When she opened them, she saw a flicker of movement. Far off, a figure, or maybe a shadow, slipping between the pines. She couldn't be sure. She looked back toward the fire. He was staring at the same spot, his jaw tight. "Get some rest," he said, without turning his head. "It's going to be a long ride." But his hand stayed on his revolver, and his eyes stayed on the dark. She walked back to the fire and sat down across from him. The flames cast their faces in gold and black. For a moment, neither spoke. The crackle of wood filled the silence. She wanted to ask him what was really in the crates. She wanted to ask him who was out there in the trees. She wanted to ask if he'd ever lost anyone on this trail. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she watched the sparks rise and vanish into the night sky, like prayers too small to reach heaven. The wind shifted. The horses stamped. Somewhere a twig snapped. Her heart beat faster. She wrapped her blanket tighter around her shoulders, feeling the weight of everything she didn't yet know. Dawn felt far away, and the trail beyond it even farther. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "What happens if we don't make it?" He didn't answer right away. Fire popped. The shadows deepened. Then he looked at her, and in his eyes she saw not fear but something harder. "We will," he said. "But you'll never be the same." The night held its breath. Beyond the circle of firelight, the darkness moved again. This time she was sure she saw a glint of metal or eyes watching. She reached for her rifle but kept it low. Her partner rose slowly to his feet, and just like that, the question between them, too big, too dangerous, too late, hung heavier than ever. As the first sound of a footstep echoed from the trees, the sound from the trees came again, faint but real this time. She could almost count the steps between the trunks, light and careful, as if whoever moved out there had done it 100 times before. The horses shifted nervously, their heads tossing at the scent of something unknown. She kept her rifle low, but her thumb slid over the cold metal of the hammer. The man across the fire stood very still, his hand resting on his revolver but not drawing it. For a long breath, nothing happened, just the wind pushing through the pines and the quiet crackle of the fire. Then the footsteps faded, swallowed by the night. He lowered his hand and looked at her. "Scouts," he murmured, "checking how many we are, seeing if we're worth the trouble." His voice held no fear, only a hard sort of respect. "They won't strike tonight." She swallowed and tried to slow her heartbeat. "You're sure?" "As sure as anyone can be on this land." He sat again, eyes still on the dark. "They're good at waiting. Better than we are. We'll move at first light and hope they let us pass." She nodded and set the rifle across her knees. The night felt heavier now. She wanted to ask more questions, but sensed that pressing him would only close him off. So instead, she listened to the sounds around them, forcing herself to breathe slowly. The fire gave her face a warm glow, but her hands stayed cold. When she finally spoke again, her voice was low. "What's in the crates?" He didn't answer right away. He reached for a stick and stirred the fire, sending a spray of sparks up into the sky. "Things people will kill for," he said at last. "Things the government pretends it can control." "That's not much of an answer." "It's all I can give until you've earned more." He looked at her then, and for a moment his eyes softened. "This job isn't just about money. It's about choice. About who gets to decide what happens on this land." She shifted on the ground, the blanket slipping from her shoulders. "And you think hauling whatever this is through bandit country will change something?" "It might. Or it might just make us both richer. But either way, you'll see why it matters soon enough." His words hung between them like smoke. She thought about the debts she'd left behind, about the long nights she'd spent on freight runs across dry plains, always one step ahead of hunger. She thought about her mother's old warning that some roads were cursed from the start. Yet here she was, sitting beside a man she barely knew, guarding crates filled with danger. The fire burned lower. She rose and moved to her horse, checking the straps on the saddle, feeling the weight of the rifle at her hip. She whispered to the animal, trying to calm them both. Above, the stars blazed brighter now, and the moon had climbed high, a pale coin over the black hills. Behind her, he began speaking again, his voice softer than before, like a story told to the flames. "I grew up near the border," he said, "on the edge of a place the maps barely show. My father traded horses. My mother cooked for miners and soldiers. When I was old enough, I learned every trail and every water hole. I learned where you can disappear if you have to. And I learned what happens when you can't." She turned, drawn back by the sound of his words. He wasn't looking at her now, but at the fire, his face unreadable. "I rode for the army for a time," he went on. "Scouting land they had no right to take. Marking places for forts, for roads. I thought it was just work. Thought it didn't matter. But it does. It always does. When you see families driven off their land, when you watch treaties broken like dry twigs, you start to wonder who you're really working for." She sank back to the ground across from him. "So you left?" "I left," he said simply. "And I started running loads like this one. Not for the army, not for the gangs. For the people caught in between." She watched him in silence. His story was a piece of a puzzle she didn't yet understand. "And me?" she asked finally. "Why me?" He met her eyes then. "Because you know how to keep moving when the trail gets rough. Because you don't scare easy. And because I need someone who isn't already tied to one side or the other." She stared at the fire, thinking of the small town she'd left, the gossip about her stubbornness, the nights she'd spent alone on the trail. He was right about one thing: she didn't scare easy. But fear was different out here. It was bigger, older. A gust of wind bent the flames sideways. Somewhere out in the dark, an owl called again, long and low. She felt a shiver crawl up her spine. "What if they attack at dawn?" she asked. "Then we keep moving," he said, "fast and quiet. The less we fight, the better our chances. But be ready. Always be ready." She nodded, fingers brushing the rifle. The mystery of the crates pressed heavier on her now. Not just gold or weapons, she thought. Something else. Something that could change lives. The fire dropped to embers. They sat in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. She watched him check his revolver, then lean back against his saddle, hat tilted low. Even at rest, he looked like a man expecting trouble. She lay down too, but kept her eyes open. Okay? Watching the shadows dance across the trees. Every creak of a branch, every whisper of wind felt like a signal. Sleep never came. Only a restless half-dream of running horses and distant gunfire. When the first streak of pale light touched the horizon, she sat up, her body stiff from the cold ground. The man was already awake, packing the fire out with dirt. Without a word, he handed her a tin cup of coffee, its steam curling into the morning chill. They broke camp quickly, rolling blankets, tightening saddles, checking weapons. The forest around them was silent, but alive with unseen eyes. She felt them even more in daylight, like a weight at her back. As they mounted up, He glanced at the trees. "Stay close," he said. "If anything happens, don't stop." She nodded and pulled her hat low. The horses moved forward, hooves soft on the pine needles. The trail wound through the trees, then rose toward a ridgeline where the sun caught on stone. The air smelled of sap and damp earth. Her mind drifted back to his words from the night before, about choice and land and broken promises. She wondered if the people watching them from the shadows saw them as enemies or allies. She wondered if she would find out before the day was over. They rode in silence for an hour. The only sound, the creak of leather, and the occasional call of a bird. The crates in the wagon rattled with each bump, a steady reminder of the stakes. She caught herself glancing at them, trying to guess their weight, their shape, their secret. Finally she spoke. "What happens when we reach the pass?" He didn't look at her. "If we make it that far, you'll see. There's a canyon beyond, a place where few dare to go. That's where we'll meet the ones waiting for this load, and if the scouts attack before then?" He gave a thin smile. "Then we'll see how fast you can ride." His answer did nothing to calm her nerves. She adjusted her grip on the reins and scanned the trees. Every flicker of movement felt like a threat. The sun climbed higher, but the trail felt colder. As the ridge loomed ahead, she thought again of his question. Too big. This journey, this secret, this man she had chosen to follow all of it, felt larger than she could hold. But she had given her answer already. "Fill me slowly. Teach me. Show me." The trail narrowed. Rocks jutted up from the earth, forcing the horses into single file. She felt the walls of the pass close in, the trees thinning to bare stone. Somewhere above, a hawk circled. Then she heard a sound that didn't belong to the wind or the horses. A faint whistle, high and short like a signal. She looked up but saw nothing. The man in front of her stiffened, his hand brushing the rifle at his saddle. "Keep moving," he said under his breath. Her heart thudded. She tightened her grip on the reins and urged her horse forward. The wagon creaked behind them, the crates shifting. The path ahead curved out of sight. Another whistle came, closer this time. A shadow flickered on the ridge above, gone before she could be sure. The man's shoulders tensed. "Stay ready," he said. "This is where they like to strike." The pass seemed to hold its breath. The air was dry and sharp. Her mouth felt like sand. She scanned the rocks, the ledges, the thin strip of sky. Any moment now, she thought. Any moment, and everything will change. She reached for her rifle, fingers steady but cold. The wagon wheels rattled over stones. The hawk cried once and vanished into the blue. Ahead, the trail bent sharply, and beyond it lay only more rock and shadow. She could feel unseen eyes on her, the weight of choice pressing down. Somewhere out there, someone was waiting, and just as the curve of the pass hid them from view, single shot rang out from above. The crack of the rifle shot echoed off the walls of the pass, sharp and final. Her horse lurched sideways, eyes rolling white. She ducked low, instinct carrying her body before her mind could catch up. Dust sprayed up where the bullet hit the rock beside her. She heard the man ahead snap his reins, his voice rough but steady. "Ride." She dug her heels into the horse's sides. The wagon jolted behind them, crates banging like a drumbeat. Another shot cracked from above, this one whistling past her shoulder. She didn't look up. She knew if she did, she'd lose the rhythm of the trail. Her whole world narrowed to the horse's heaving muscles, the sound of hooves on stone, and the man's back ahead of her. They barreled around the bend and into a wider stretch of canyon. He raised his arm, signaling. "There." He shouted over the thunder of hooves. She followed his gesture and saw a narrow cleft to the left, half hidden behind boulders. He veered into it without slowing. She dragged the wagon behind her horse into the gap, heart hammering. The passage twisted, its walls closing them in. At the far end, it opened into a dry wash dotted with scrub. They burst out, skidding to a stop. He swung off his horse and yanked her down from the wagon. "Keep low," he barked, pulling her behind a rock. "Oat." Her breath came in ragged gasps. Above them, the ridgeline was empty, but she could still feel eyes on her. "Who are they?" she whispered. He scanned the rim. Could be the scouts from last night. Could be someone else. He squinted, as if reading signs in the stone. Either way, they're not finished. The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. She held her rifle close, palms slick. The crates in the wagons sat exposed in the sunlight, their canvas covers fluttering. She wanted to drag them to safety, but didn't dare move. After a moment, he crouched beside her. "We need to circle south. Take the old arroyo," he said. "It'll add half a day, but it's safer." She stared at him. "Safer? We just got shot at." A flicker of grim humor touched his mouth. "Exactly. They think we're headed east. We'll go where they won't expect." He moved quickly to the wagon, checking the horses, adjusting the load. She watched him, still shaking. Something in the way he handled the crates, gentle but urgent, made her realize again how important they were. She thought of his words from the night before, about choice and broken promises. She wanted to demand the truth now. But the tension in the air stopped her. As he tightened the straps, she noticed one of the covers had slipped, revealing a corner of what looked like polished wood and brass. It wasn't gold. It wasn't weapons. It looked like some kind of instrument, delicate and strange. She caught her breath. "What is that?" she asked before she could stop herself. He glanced at her and then at the exposed corner. Without answering, he pulled the cover back over it and tied it down. "Later," he said, "when we're clear." She swallowed hard, the mystery tightening around her like a noose. They moved out again, slipping through the wash and into the narrow arroyo. The horses' hooves sank in soft sand, muffling their passage. Overhead the sky was a hard blue, the sun pressing heat onto their backs. Her nerves stayed stretched taut, waiting for another shot, another shadow on the ridge. But nothing came. Hours passed in tense silence. She began to notice small signs she had missed before, the way he glanced at the sun to judge time. The faint tracks of other riders etched into the sand, the broken branches that told of someone moving ahead of them. This wasn't just a job to him. He was reading a map she couldn't see, playing a game she didn't know the rules of. When they stopped to water the horses, she finally spoke. "How long have they been following us?" He poured water into a tin pan and set it down for the animals. "Since we left town," he said. "Maybe longer? And you didn't tell me?" "You wouldn't have come if I had." She stared at him, anger rising in her chest. "You think I'm scared now?" "I think you're smart enough to be," he said quietly. "Fear keeps you alive." She looked away, blinking against the glare. He was right, but it didn't make her less angry. They moved on, the arroyo walls rising higher. In the afternoon, they reached a narrow cut where the sand gave way to rock. He signaled for her to stop and dismounted. "We'll rest here," he said. "It's hidden from above." She climbed down stiffly, every muscle aching from tension. The place he had chosen was a small hollow, shaded by an overhang of stone. The air smelled of sage and dust. She led her horse in and tethered it to a low shrub. He crouched near the entrance, scanning the horizon. "We'll wait until the sun drops. Travel at night from here." She sat on a flat rock, trying to still her hands. Her eyes drifted again to the wagon, to the covered crates. The corner she had glimpsed earlier burned in her mind. Whatever lay inside wasn't just cargo. It was something people would kill for. Something they already had. She thought of the small town she'd left, of the debts she'd fled, of the way her own people had been pushed aside, their land taken, their choices stripped. Maybe the thing in the crates was a chance to change something. Or maybe it was just another tool for someone else's power. She couldn't know. He broke into her thoughts by handing her a piece of hardtack. She took it, chewing slowly. "You should sleep a little," he said. "I can't," she admitted. "Not while they're out there." He gave a small nod, as if he had expected that. "Then listen instead," he said. "You'll learn." And so she listened to the wind scraping over stone, to the low sound of his breathing, to the faint clink of metal as he checked his revolver. She realized he was teaching her without words, showing her how to survive by example. As dusk approached, shadows lengthened across the hollow. He rose and began saddling the horses again. "We'll take the back trail through the canyon," he said. "It's rough, but it leads to the meeting place." She stood, brushing dust from her pants. Who are we meeting? He hesitated, then said simply, the ones who sent for this load. People who can use it, and you trust them. His eyes flicked to hers, and she saw a flicker of doubt there. Enough to try, he said. They set out as the sun dipped behind the ridges, the sky turning copper and then deep blue. The canyon swallowed them, its walls high and dark. The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of water somewhere ahead as they rode deeper. She began to feel a strange pull, as if the land itself held memories. The stones were carved with old markings, worn by time but still visible. She recognized symbols from stories her grandmother had told. Marks of people who had lived here long before soldiers and towns. She reached out to touch one as they passed, her fingers brushing the cool rock. He noticed, "You can read those?" He asked. "Some," she said softly. "Not all." "Then maybe you'll understand better than I do what we're carrying," he murmured. Her heart quickened. She wanted to press him, but his tone told her he wouldn't say more. Night settled fully. They rode in near silence, only the sound of hooves and the faint rush of water echoing off the canyon walls. Every shadow seemed to move. She felt eyes on her again, but this time it wasn't just fear. It was a sense of being part of something older, bigger. At a narrow bend he raised his hand, signaling stop. She pulled up, scanning the darkness. He tilted his head, listening. She heard it too, a faint whisper of voices ahead carried by the breeze. He dismounted, motioning her to stay back. "Wait here," he said. "I'll see who it is." Her grip tightened on the reins. "Don't go alone." He gave her a look she couldn't read. "Stay with the load," he said, "no matter what." Then he slipped into the shadows, moving like water over stone. She sat frozen in the saddle, the wagon creaking softly behind her. The canyon felt alive now, the markings on the walls glowing faintly in the starlight. The voices ahead grew clearer, but she couldn't make out the words. Minutes stretched, each one heavier than the last. She thought of riding after him, of abandoning the crates, of turning back. But his order held her in place. Then she heard a new sound, a low drum beat, steady and slow, echoing through the canyon. Her horse shifted nervously. She looked toward the bend but saw only darkness. The drum beat grew louder, joined by a single high whistle, the same signal she'd heard before. She felt her stomach drop. Whoever was out there wasn't just waiting. They were gathering. She drew her rifle, heart thudding. The canyon walls seemed to lean closer, their carvings whispering secrets she couldn't understand. Somewhere ahead, beyond the curve. The man she had chosen to follow was either making a deal or walking into a trap. She adjusted her grip on the rifle and stared into the dark, every sense straining. The drum beat echoed once more, then stopped. Silence fell like a weight. The canyon held its silence like a closed fist. Her fingers tightened around the rifle as she sat in the saddle, feeling the horse's tremor travel up her legs. The wagon behind her creaked once and then went still, as if even the crates were holding their breath. Somewhere beyond the curve, her partner had disappeared, swallowed by rock and shadow. She strained to catch any sound, his boots, his voice. Even a cough, but there was only the faint rush of unseen water and the echo of her own heartbeat. The drum beat began again, softer now, but closer. Each thud reverberated through the stone walls, a slow pulse that set her teeth on edge. She tried to remember every story she had ever heard about ambushes in canyons, about signals passed from one scout to another. She thought of his warning to stay with the load no matter what. Her eyes flicked to the crates, their covers fluttering slightly in the night breeze. And she felt the weight of their secret press heavier on her. A whisper of movement came from the rocks above. She lifted the rifle, eyes scanning the ledges. Nothing moved. Then, just at the edge of her vision, she caught a glint metal her eyes. She couldn't tell. The horse shifted again, nostrils flaring. She leaned forward and whispered to it, steadying both of them with the sound of her own voice. Another drum beat rolled down the canyon. Louder now, and it was joined by a low chant. Words she couldn't make out, but felt deep in her chest. She thought of the markings carved into the stone, of the old symbols her grandmother had told her about, of promises made long before she was born. This canyon wasn't just a pass. It was a place of memory, of power, and she was caught in the middle of it. Sitting atop a wagon full of something worth killing for. Then she heard it a single shot, far ahead where the path bent. The crack echoed, then died. Her breath caught. She rose in the stirrups, straining to see, but the curve of the canyon hid everything. She clutched the rifle tighter, torn between obeying his order and riding to him. Another shot rang out, closer this time. A horse screamed. The chant stopped abruptly. She could not sit still any longer. She swung down from the saddle, boots crunching on the gravel. She moved to the wagon, untied the reins from the post, and looped them around her wrists so she could pull the team if she had to. Her heart pounded. She had hauled freight through storms and deserts, but nothing had ever felt like this. Every breath tasted like copper and dust. From ahead came a voice not his, but deeper, commanding, in a language she didn't know. Then another voice answered, sharper, angrier. She thought she recognized the edge in it. She took a step forward, still holding the reins, pulling the wagon slightly ahead. The horses resisted, ears pinned back. She soothed them under her breath and forced herself to keep moving. The canyon narrowed again, its walls streaked with moonlight. She eased forward until she could see the bend where the path widened into a small open space. There, caught in the pale glow, stood her partner. His hat was gone, his hair hanging loose. His hands were raised slightly, palms out. Across from him, half hidden in shadow, a line of figures stood on the rocksmen, with rifles and bows, their faces painted, eyes fixed on him. Between them, at the edge of the firelight, sat a drum. She pressed herself against the canyon wall, her pulse hammering. She could see now that the crates were no secret to these men. They knew this meeting wasn't a surprise to them at all. It was a test. Her partner spoke again, his voice low but firm, and she caught only fragments: safe passage, supplies, promises. The leader of the group answered in clipped words. The rifles didn't lower. She shifted her grip on the rifle, sweat running down her spine. One wrong move, and the canyon would explode with gunfire. She watched her partner's face, the tension in his jaw. He wasn't just bargaining for the crates. He was bargaining for their lives. One of the men on the rocks moved suddenly, stepping closer. The leader raised a hand to stop him, but the motion was too quick. Her partner's hand twitched toward his belt, and she almost cried out. She held her breath, waiting for the crack of another shot. Instead, the leader spoke again, louder this time, and the younger man backed away slowly. The chant resumed, softer, as if to calm the air. Her partner lowered his hands but didn't turn his back. She could see now how tired he looked, how carefully he measured each word. This was the man she had followed out of town, the man who had said this was about choice. Now she understood he was carrying more than freight. He was carrying a fragile line of trust. It was fraying. She realized she was standing in plain sight now, the wagon just behind her. The figures on the rocks had noticed. A few of them turned their heads toward her, eyes glinting. Her stomach dropped. She had disobeyed his order. She had brought the load right into the middle of whatever was happening. Her fingers tightened on the rifle until her knuckles went white. Her partner's eyes flicked to her, a flash of warning. He spoke quickly to the leader, gesturing toward the crates. The leader answered, voice hard. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. It was the sound of a decision being made. A breeze swept down the canyon, lifting the covers on the crates. For an instant, the contents gleamed in the moonlight, the polished wood and brass she had glimpsed before. A shape like a small cannon, but delicate, etched with symbols she recognized from the canyon walls. The leader's eyes narrowed. The chant stopped again. She took a step back, bumping into the wagon. The horses snorted, restless. Her partner raised a hand, palm out, as if to hold the moment still. "Stay calm," he said, his voice carrying across the space. She couldn't tell if he was speaking to her or to them. The leader lowered his rifle, but did not put it down. He stepped forward, eyes locked on the crates. He spoke one word, sharp and unmistakable. "Why?" Her partner answered slowly, carefully. He spoke of broken treaties, of stolen land, of promises made in secret. He said the crates held something that could change the balance, something taken from these people long ago. He said he was bringing it back. His words echoed in the canyon, falling like stones into water. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the leader spoke again, a low rumble of suspicion. He gestured at the wagon, then at her. She felt every eye shift to her, felt the weight of their scrutiny. Her mouth went dry. Her partner said her name softly once, as if to anchor her. She straightened, forcing herself to meet the leader's gaze. She didn't know what he saw in her face: fear, determination, desperation, but his eyes narrowed further. He said something else, a question. Her partner hesitated before answering. The pause stretched like a wire. A sound broke at a high whistle from the canyon rim. The same signal she had heard before, but sharper now, urgent. The leader stiffened. The men on the rocks lifted their rifles. Her partner swore under his breath. "More coming," he muttered. She glanced up and saw shapes moving on the ridge, silhouettes of riders against the stars. Not the leader's men. Someone else. Another faction closing in. The canyon was about to become a trap for everyone inside it. Her partner turned to her, eyes fierce. "Get the wagon ready," he said. "Now." She scrambled back, fumbling with the reins. The horses danced nervously, sensing the tension. The figures on the ridge moved closer, the glint of metal in their hands. The leader barked orders to his men, but they were divided. Glancing between her partner and the ridge above, she hauled herself into the driver's seat, gripping the reins tight. Her partner climbed onto his horse, but didn't mount fully, staying low. The leader shouted something, and two of his men ran to the edge of the open space, aiming up at the ridge. The air smelled of sweat and gun oil and fear. The first shot cracked from above, a spark in the darkness. One of the leader's men dropped, rifle clattering. Another shot followed, splintering rock near her head. She ducked instinctively, pulling the horses forward. Her partner swung onto his saddle and shouted, "Go!" She lashed the reins, and the wagon lurched forward. The crates rattled, their covers flapping. The horses surged into a gallop, hooves pounding on the canyon floor. Behind her, the clash of gunfire erupted, echoing off the walls. Men shouted in two languages, their voices overlapping. She risked a glance back. Her partner was riding alongside, his revolver drawn but pointed down. The leader's men were scattering, some firing up at the ridge, some at them. The riders above moved like shadows, cutting off the exits. The canyon had become a killing ground. Her partner shouted something she couldn't hear over the thunder of hooves. He gestured ahead to a narrow cut between boulders. She steered the wagon toward it, praying the horses would hold. The passage loomed closer, a thin line of darkness against the stone. Bullets sparked on rock around them. She ducked low, urging the horses faster. The wagon swayed dangerously, wheels striking hidden stones. A crate shifted, its cover tearing open to reveal more of the strange device inside. She glimpsed the carvings on its surface glowing faintly in the moonlight, like embers of a fire long dead. Her breath caught. Whatever this was, it was alive with meaning. Her partner drew level with her, shouting over the noise. "Don't stop. No matter what happens, don't stop." The cut in the rocks loomed ahead. She felt the canyon tighten around them, the sound of gunfire fading to a distant roar. The horses plunged into the darkness, the wagon scraping the walls. Behind them, the clash of two groups erupted fully, voices raised, shots echoing. She gripped the reins until her fingers went numb, eyes fixed on the narrow strip of starlight ahead. The wagon thundered through the passage, every jolt rattling her bones. She didn't dare look back. She didn't dare think of what they were leaving behind. She only knew they were running toward something even bigger. The next bend would decide if they lived or died. The wagon burst from the narrow cut and out into a wide plain washed in early dawn light. The sky stretched huge above them, streaked pink and gray, as if the night had been torn open to make room for morning. The horses, lathered with sweat, slowed only when she pulled hard on the reins and spoke softly to them, her voice trembling. Her partner rode up alongside, his face drawn but steady, scanning the horizon behind them for any sign of pursuit. There was nothing. The canyon lay hidden now, silent, except for a faint echo of gunfire that faded with every heartbeat. They slowed to a walk. She realized she had been holding her breath since the first shot. Her hands shook as she guided the wagon toward a small stand of cottonwoods near a creek. The horses drank greedily when she let them, their sides heaving. She slid down from the seat, boots hitting the damp grass. For a moment she simply stood there, staring at her reflection in the water, her face pale beneath the brim of her hat. She had seen more violence in one night than in all her years on the road, and yet here she was, still standing, her partner dismounted, wincing as he hit the ground. He checked the crates first, then his revolver, then finally looked at her. His eyes were tired but alive. "You did well," he said quietly. It was the first thing he had said since the canyon. She nodded, unable to speak. They crouched by the creek and drank, the cold water, shocking but clean. Only when she had caught her breath did she dare to ask, who were they? He stared at the horizon a long time before answering. People who had something stolen from them. People who don't trust easy. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small piece of wood carved, with the same symbols that marked the crates. This isn't just freight. It's part of a promise. It belongs to them. His voice was low but firm. We were bringing it back. That's why it mattered so much. She thought of the leader's eyes, the drum beats, the chant. She thought of how the carvings on the device had glimmered in the moonlight, alive with history. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked softly. He gave a small, tired smile. "Would you have come if you knew?" He didn't say it like a challenge, more like a confession. She realized he had been carrying the burden of this choice alone. She also realized she would have come anyway, even if she had known, because she had seen the same thing he had, the way the old symbols seemed to reach across time. Pulling them into a story larger than their own, they camped by the creek as the sun rose higher. She unpacked some food from the supplies, hands still trembling but steadier now. He built a small fire and set coffee to boil, the smell curling into the morning air. For a little while they ate in silence, listening to the water and the wind through the trees. It felt almost ordinary, but the weight of what they had just survived hung between them. When the horses had rested and the fire burned low, he stood and brushed off his hands. "We have to keep moving," he said. "There's a place ahead where we can meet the rest of them, where we can finish this." She looked at the crates, at the strange device nestled inside, and then back at him. "And then what?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Finally he said, "Then maybe we stop running." They rode on through the day, leaving the creek behind. The land opened into rolling grass and distant buttes. Birds wheeled overhead. It was hard to believe that just hours ago they had been in a canyon filled with rifles and drums. Yet she felt the tension still, like a knot in her chest. The wagon rattled behind her horse, its cargo shifting with each bump. She kept glancing back, half expecting riders to appear on the horizon. But the only thing following them was the long shadow of the wagon stretching across the prairie. By late afternoon they reached a rise where the ground dipped into a sheltered valley. At its center stood a ring of old stones and a few low huts of earth and wood. Smoke rose from a single fire. As they approached, figures emerged from the huts, watching silently. She recognized the leader from the canyon, his paint streaked and faded now. He raised a hand in greeting, not as an enemy, but as someone waiting for a long-delayed answer. They stopped the wagon at the edge of the stones. Her partner dismounted first, hands open, then motioned for her to do the same. She climbed down slowly, aware of the eyes on her. The leader stepped forward, speaking in his own language, then switched to one she could understand. "You brought it?" he asked. Her partner nodded and gestured to the crate. Together, they lifted it down and set it in the grass. When the leader opened it, the morning sun fell on the polished wood and brass. The carvings seemed to glow once more, as if the land itself recognized them. A low murmur passed through the gathered people. The leader reached in and touched the device gently, like one might touch a child's hand. He looked at her partner and then at her. "You kept your word," he said simply. His eyes softened slightly. "You both risked much." Her partner shook his head. It wasn't ours to keep, he said. We only carried it. He glanced at her then, a flicker of something in his eyes, relief, gratitude, maybe even apology. She felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. This wasn't her story, not really, but she had become part of it by choice. The leader spoke again, quieter. You are safe here for tonight. Tomorrow, you go where you wish. The promise is kept. He signaled to someone, and food was brought from one of the huts. Children peeked out from behind skirts, eyes wide. The chant began again, softer now, not a warning, but a welcome. It rose and fell like the wind over the grass. That evening they sat by the fire inside the ring of stones. The leader and his people spoke among themselves, their words a blend of old and new. Her partner told her pieces of the story he had left out before, how years ago the device had been taken during a raid, how it had been hidden and sold, how he had stumbled onto its trail, how returning it might heal more than one wound. He didn't know if it would be enough, but it was a start. She listened, the flames flickering on his face. She thought of all the roads she had traveled, all the loads she had hauled without ever knowing their meaning. This time she knew. This time she had chosen to see, and somehow that changed everything. When the fire burned low, the leader approached them. He placed a small carved piece of wood in her hands, a token matching the symbols on the device. You carried it when danger came, he said. Now you carry this. It will remind you. She felt the weight of it, light but solid, and nodded. She didn't have words to answer. Later, under a sky crowded with stars, she lay awake near the wagon. Her partner was a few feet away, his breathing slow and even. Around them the camp had gone quiet, except for the soft rustle of the grass. She held the carved token in her palm and stared at the sky. She thought of how easily life could split in two before and after, how a single choice could pull you into a larger story. She wondered what she would do next, where the road would lead. But she also felt, for the first time in a long while, that she wasn't just drifting. She had purpose. At dawn, they packed the wagon one last time. The leader's people watched but did not interfere. When they mounted up, the leader stepped forward and raised a hand. Go, he said simply. The road is open. Her partner nodded in return. They rode out together, the wagon lighter now, the horizon wide and clear. As the valley fell away behind them, she looked back once and saw the ring of stones glowing in the morning sun. She turned forward again, the token still warm in her hand. Her partner rode in silence beside her, but there was a calmness in his face she hadn't seen before. The land stretched out ahead, full of dust and wind and endless miles. It no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a beginning. They didn't speak much as the day unfolded, each lost in thought. Yet a quiet understanding passed between them. They had done something that mattered. They had returned something stolen, and in doing so, they had found a piece of themselves. The journey had been long and hard, but it had left them changed in ways neither could have predicted. By the time the sun was high, the valley was a distant memory, and the road lay open. She straightened in the saddle, feeling the wind against her face. Whatever came next, she knew she would ride it out. She knew she would remember. And she knew, in some unspoken way, that this story would stay with her forever.